is Resolute and the Resolute Podcast, where we are discipling and developing men to live with conviction. I am Vince Miller, your host, and today we are discussing Holy Week. Today's topic is courage on Palm Sunday. Men, welcome back to the program. If this is your first time tuning in, then thank you for joining us. The Resolute Podcast is produced multiple times every week. We have Resolute study guides that go along with this podcast for your men's group, found on the website for members at beresolute.org. Come back often. Feel free to add this podcast to your favorite RSS feed or in iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. All the links are on the homepage of the website. So let's dive in. So guys, today is Palm Sunday. Happy Palm Sunday to you. And I think it's a noble task to spend some time this week reflecting on Holy Week and the events of Christ's life. I want to challenge you to do this every day, to spend a little time in reflection. And if you want to, I'd love to have you spend that time with me. This week, I want to guide you through a few thoughts daily as we head into Sunday. You know, I think we often unintentionally cheapen Resurrection Sunday when we don't take the time to reflect on the events of this week. This year, I want to challenge you men with a short thought each day as we travel the Passion Week with Christ. Now, I'm going to be drawing attention to a few details of Jesus' last week, but I especially want to consider how Jesus might have felt this week. I am setting out with this goal so that we can deeply connect with Sunday and celebrate not only just being with family and putting on Sunday's best and heading to church for an event, but in hopes that we will be creating a spiritual connection to this incredible day. You know, each of the coming days, I want to give you a short thought that will give you something to reflect on as we head into Sunday, and it is my hope that this will bless you spiritually. You might also want to share these thoughts with a friend or a family member as a way to influence their experience on Sunday as well. So I'm going to really encourage you this week to share the podcast. Just email it out to somebody, share it with them, get them listening and reflecting with you. So today is Sunday, Palm Sunday. Most of us know this well as the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Let me read part of the occurrence as it takes place in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21. Beginning verse 1, Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say this, The Lord needs them, and he will send them at once. This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, so here's the Old Testament prophecy, hundreds of years in the past. Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went before him and that followed him were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, Who is this? And the crowd said, This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. So let me ask you a question, guys. Have you ever felt profound courage? Have you ever had one of those moments where you felt profound courage? Probably the most courageous move I have made in my life was starting this nonprofit organization, Resolute, at the age of 43. I will never forget the moment. About 4 years ago, I was at a real crossroads in my career. I had just stepped out of my job at a large church in the area, and I was struggling with what might be next for me. After 20 years of working in ministry, I was struggling to know if I was to continue to work in full-time vocational ministry. I knew this crossroads was a critical one because whatever path I was going to choose next would lead me down, really, I was hoping a lifelong legacy. I had two choices. I could stay in ministry or I could leave it forever and choose another career. And I was really debating this. I hit my 40s. I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about the legacy that I want to leave. And I was really struggling on the inside. I had numerous ministry opportunities that came across my path over the coming months, and it was not easy to turn many of them down. To be quite honest, I don't know that if I would have earlier in life. And then there were two that came along specifically that came at the same time for which I was very uniquely qualified, both high-level jobs, one as a president, the other as an executive. What was interesting is that after many months of being courted by these two organizations, both jobs fell apart at the end and both became a fiasco. At this moment, I was left feeling genuinely confused and even spiritually defeated. And I would say I was angry at God. I was angry at God. At the same time, over the last many years, I had been leading these men's groups using a curriculum that I had designed, that I continued to improve, and I was leading guys through these group experiences where I was helping to disciple and develop them as men. And I'll never forget, it was Valentine's Day of 2014, so just a few years ago. My wife and I went out to celebrate. I remember eating a rather stressful meal with her because we were running low on income fast. And with 3 teenage kids, we were starting to get a little stressed about the finances. My wife owns a small interior design firm, and it was not enough to support a family of 5 at the time just on her salary. At this meal, we literally spent our last $100 in our bank account. This was a really tense moment. I don't know why we went out to eat, but my wife insisted. Then as the meal came to a close, my wife says to me, "I think you should turn those men's groups that you have been leading into a viable ministry." I remember looking at her a little baffled, thinking she was crazy, and I think I may have said that to her too. And I remember saying to her that it would be crazy because why would we want to have 2 self-employed people in the same home? I mean, that is no way to find stability. And then we were trying to figure out how to create lifelong stability, or at least stability in the moment. We needed at least one person with a stable income, and that had always been me, and it just gave her time to kind of explore her gifts and talents and putting them to work for the kingdom in her own way. And then at that moment, she looked at me and she said to me, "Vince, I just want you to be happy and pursue your passion in life." And I continued to protest her thought as really unreasonable. And then she said something next that I will never forget for the rest of my life. She said, "No, Vince Miller, you're going to do this, and you better not fail me nor your family." In all the years that I've been married to my wife, she has never spoken like that to me before. But there was something different in her eyes in that moment. And I was such an emotional wreck over the previous few months that this moment was very motivating for me, very motivating. What my wife said to me in her own way was, "Get some courage. Get some courage, Vince Miller." And of course, over the next month, I built a business plan and launched a ministry on March 4th of 2014 named Resolute, that seeks to disciple and develop men to live with conviction. Courage. Real courage. You know, John McCain, former prisoner of war, has defined courage as this. He says, courage is that rare moment of unity between conscious fear and action, when something deep within us strikes that flint of love, of honor, of duty, to make the spark that fires our resolve. I like what he's saying here. As a former prisoner of war, who knows courage better than the man that suffers in a prison by himself for years and years? He calls it that rare moment of unity between conscience, fear, and action, when something deep within us strikes, right? Moving us into action and living with resolve. I love this statement. I think he's right about this courage, that it is something that happens in a moment deep inside of our soul, that we are sparked. And I would add to this, we are sparked by God's moral compass that fires a willingness to act on his behalf for the benefit of the kingdom. Now, let me say that again, because I'm adding something to what John McCain said here that I believe ties it more strongly into God's word. Let me say it again. Courage is something that happens in a moment when deep inside our soul and spirit we are sparked by God's morality, his moral compass that fires a willingness to act on his behalf for the benefit of the kingdom, not ourselves. Now, if you asked me how Jesus felt at this moment when he's making his triumphal entry, I would suggest to you that he felt the deepest of courage only accentuated by his explicit knowledge of the days ahead. Because keep in mind, Jesus knew what was coming. Gentlemen, that is real courage. That is real courage. You know, we must muster courage to do what God wants us to do when we're not aware of the outcome. But in this situation, Jesus does it when he does know the outcome. So let me ask you, which requires greater courage? Which requires greater courage? You know, if this week you have to face into a moment that requires courage, then you are a part of a select moment, a moment of greatness. And in this instance, you will experience a small fraction of what I believe Jesus experiences on this day, Palm Sunday, in history. For example, if this week you need to muster the courage to stand up for an injustice at work, this might be your moment of courage. If this week you need to have a challenging conversation with someone, then lean in and be courageous. If this week you need to stand your ground on a matter of morality, then muster some courage. And if this week you're facing a moment with friends that entices you to sacrifice your beliefs, then stand your ground and muster some courage, because men, when you do, you're experiencing only a small taste of the courage that Jesus displayed on this day over 2,000 years ago. And never forget, he was courageous for you and wants you in turn to do the same. Well, gentlemen, that's the show. Thank you so much for listening. I want you to continue listening to the series of podcasts as we travel Holy Week. I want to encourage you today to live with courage and to share courageously this podcast with someone you know and love that needs courage in their life right now. And guys, as always, I want you to remember, I love you. Get off the bench, get into the game, and we'll see you right back here next time for another episode of the Resolute Podcast.